Hello, in 1999 Tekken Tag Tournament hit arcades. This was the follow-up to the amazingly successful 1998 game Tekken 3 and the first non-canonical installment that we see in the Tekken franchise. Now, as the name suggests, this game introduces a tag element which was quite innovative for the franchise at the time, but more than that, I feel that this installment of the series that is excluded from the main story arc, the main narrative of the game, has an endurance and popularity solely due to the fact that it brings all the large and minor, absent or killed off, and all the characters from the first trilogy of games, Tekken 1, 2 through to 3. For the first time, it brings them all into the same game, and they are all updated and embellished and kind of designed up to Tekken 3 standards, which is kind of a big jump that we see from the first two games. Now, as this kind of relates to the fact that, as I'm sure you're aware if you've watched any of these other kind of videos, a common thread that I feel contributes to the success of Tekken is the popularity of its characters and the innovative look and design and gameplay mechanics of each of the respective characters in the Tekken series, that we see throughout. So the creation of Tekken Tag Tournament is a perfect emphasis of this, in my opinion. It's a non-canon game that serves more, really, and I think its main purpose is to serve as a compilation of all the favourite Tekken characters to date. So, for example, using a few of my personal favourites, there's, Baekdu-san, there's Kanemitsu, there's Armor King, there's Lee Cha-lan, and they're all present, with redesigned with this kind of updated gameplay, to a high standard. And although admittedly some of these characters went on to be reintroduced, such as Baekdu-san we see in Tekken 5, we see Armor King's successor kind of reintroduced, and we see Lee Cha-lan appears in Tekken 4 under the flimsy guise of Violet. But at this time, what we're seeing is Namco kind of honouring the legacy that they had established thus far, and they're sort of punctuating. This is sort of like a full stop after the PlayStation 1 trilogy of these games, and this serves as kind of just a fun celebratory kind of spin-off, where fans of the series can kind of play with all these characters at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I feel the presence of each and every one of the Tekken roster, and I feel that the Tekken roster in general, long-term fans of this game, I feel that all of these characters has struck a chord with with fans, and they all kind of have a kind of, even if they don't always play as them, there's a certain fondness there for these characters. And Namco, they probably felt kind of obligated to give them a current generation send-off before pursuing the story, carry on with the narrative, where they obviously kind of will go on to introduce more characters and the like in future installments. So this was sort of, in my opinion, a sort of send-off for the first three games and the innovative characters that we were introduced to in them. Now, the reinvention and the embellishment of these older characters is frankly fantastic, and I think it is one of the main selling points of this game. In the case of the characters I've already mentioned, such as Armor King and Kanemitsu, and even from Tekken 2, there's Devil and Angel as well, who I think really kind of stand out. They were so original during their original debut, these characters, but the main hindrance to them was the aesthetics and the graphical limitations of the day. So this makeover that we see in Tekken Tag is really, really great, and we see, it does complete justice to the concept and the design behind these characters, because they're so well rounded and well fleshed out now. And this is, kind of emphasised further by the updated movesets, which have been redone and embellished to the standards that we've seen in Tekken 3. And this really kind of increases the fun that you can actually have with them, and the response and the quality of handling these characters during gameplay. And I think this was a really good kind of realization of these characters for long-term Tekken fans who had been introduced to them back in 95, 94 with the first two Tekken games. There's also the addition of a character which is, unknown, and this is, this serves as the final boss character and kind of works in step with what we've seen in, the Tekken 2 and Tekken 3, which is having the, this mysterious supernatural being, kind of concluding the game. So in Tekken 3, obviously we had Ogre, Tekken 2 we had Devil, and it kind of continues that lineage that the Tekken games have, which is kind of ending on a very mysterious kind of weird note. As her name suggests, we don't really know anything about this character other than, she does share a kind of uncanny resemblance to Jun Kazama, and handles in the same way as Mokujun, where she can adopt any character's fighting style for the last battle that you have with her. Unknown is also, kind of digressing slightly, as I'm sure you're aware also if you're a Tekken fan that plays all the games. She was reintroduced in Tekken Tag 2 as the final boss as well, and this connection with Jun is emphasised more blatantly, really, because Jun morphs into Unknown for the final boss fight. So yeah, just an interesting little element there. Again, Tekken Tag is non-canon, so Unknown doesn't really serve a purpose. It's just kind of an aesthetic thing, I think, at the end of this game. And again, really fantastically done at the end of the next Tekken Tag game. So yeah, in all, I feel, Tekken Tag, and the most important element of Tekken Tag is that it is in many ways a tribute to the sub-bosses and the minor characters that we've thus far been introduced to. It offers a great platform for these characters who they kind of operate on the outside of the main game, the main game story arc. They're not to do with the Mishima bloodline per se. They're nothing to kind of do with that. But Namco are obviously aware that they still elicit a strong response from fans, and they are fan favourites. So yeah, this game is basically a platform and a tribute for these kind of minor characters, in my opinion. And it seems that the developer Namco have really stripped back on everything else just so that these characters are brought to the fore. The spectacle of this game is the featuring of the full Tekken roster to date, which leads, in my opinion, to the only potential negatives that I can see in this game. And I suppose I'll kind of talk about them now. And that is really there's a distinct lack of FMV sequences or unlockable modes that you can have in this game. Now, this only really kind of applies to, if you're playing this game one player and you're interested in kind of unlockables and things like that, which, I personally am. So in that respect, this game did seem a little bit devoid of the soul. The soul of the game was kind of absent that we've come to expect to be rewarded with in Tekken games. But, I'll kind of refute this myself by asserting that, Tekken Tag is undoubtedly, pretty much exclusively intended as a fun arcade game. And, I first played this game in an arcade, and, it has that aspect to it. It's all about the action, it's all about the gameplay, and, you just kind of stick in your money and you play the game. And it seems almost kind of coincidental that it's being ported to consoles, because its arena, it's kind of its main kind of the main arena that it should be kind of played in, the main environment is the arcade. It belongs in the arcade, but it was kind of ported to home consoles, of course, because it was so popular, and it is a continuation of this Tekken series. But and also, of course, it is a non-canon game, so there's only so much they can really give us in terms of FMV or kind of character endings, because there's no specific character development that we see here. So it kind of negates the reason for having a kind of extensive FMV sequence. But yeah, I mean, just personally, I feel it kind of takes the soul out of the game a bit. In every Tekken game to date, we've been rewarded for our kind of 8 or 10 rounds that we fought with this really nice, aesthetically pleasing rendered ending sequence. And in Tekken Tag, we're rewarded with a couple of seconds of cutscene that's in gameplay graphics as well, and it doesn't really elicit any feeling of reward or congratulation or anything like that. And it's a little unfortunate, just because we've come to expect this from the series. Tekken 1, even Tekken 1, which was a very kind of limited game in terms of the technology and things. Even Tekken 1 kind of gave us these beautifully rendered animations at the end of the arcade mode. So yeah, that was a little unfortunate for me, and yeah, and it's something that hindered the game only minorly, and only if you play it one player. I mean, playing this game two player and things like that, is great. Playing it in an arcade is great, but it's just, if you like kind of sitting down and 100%ing a game, it really kind of doesn't offer much to that end. So yeah, that's my only real gripe with this game. Now, aside from the characters, which, as I said, I feel this is kind of the main aspect of it, the gameplay is also, and the introduction of the tag element is also a kind of original foray for this franchise to kind of move into. But it's by no means original in terms of fighting games in general, because of course this is something that we've seen Capcom do repeatedly with its Versus series, and also, it done it with standalone titles such as Rival Schools, which is a great game, and it really kind of used this tag element well. The tag element for Tekken Tag is fine. It's kind of original, and it's a nice dynamic to have. If we had a standard arcade game with just all these characters, it really wouldn't nearly be as fun. So it was good that they kind of put this element in there as well. So not only do you get to play as your favourite characters, because it's non-canon, there's only so much you can really, as I've said, be rewarded with. So, the tag element kind of increases the playability a bit more, and kind of increases the longevity a bit more. And it's something they went on to develop and actually really make quite brilliant in Tekken Tag Tournament 2 that was released last year now, I think. So yeah, it's great, and it's a nice kind of staple that they've put in place for these spin-off titles. The stages and background music, as I've said, I'm kind of the first three games were my favourite for music, but the music in this game is pretty great as well. But again, the stages and the background music are a little devoid of I mean, soul is a silly word, but it's kind of what the only one I can think of right now. But because there's no narrative and there's such a massive roster, the stages seem a lot more generic, and they don't really seem to tally with any one character, which we've seen in previous games, and the same goes for the music. So there's kind of this feeling of ambiguity about them, and again, a little less soul than what we've come to expect from the series. Because as I mentioned in, I believe it was my Tekken 2 video, Heihachi has his own stage and he has his own music, and it really actually kind of embellishes his character and offers a bit of subtle character development just through these aesthetic aspects of the game, and you find that with characters such as Yoshimitsu as well, with his forest theme in Tekken 2 and Tekken 1. But you don't have this for Tekken Tag, so it's kind of, it loses a bit of that embellishment that we've come to kind of expect, and actually I really like that in previous games. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like I'm being a little unfair to that end, but ultimately, with such a focus, there was such a focus on bringing this massive roster together in a single game, I feel Namco clearly had to shift focus, from some elements. They couldn't perfect everything for this game, and I think the stages and the music and the development and the personality of the game was what suffered the most, along with the longevity of the game, by which I mean, there's no Tekken Force mode, there's no extra unlockables really. I mean, there's gallery mode, there's Tekken Bowl mode, which is pretty fun actually, but there's just less personality and less kind of conviction to want to play the game than we've seen with kind of previous games. So yeah, I mean, this has been a comparatively short overview because it's a non-canon game. I feel there's actually kind of less to discuss about Tekken Tag Tournament. In all, I think it's a very well executed, it's a very well realised game, and it works as a fantastic punctuation mark which celebrates the entirety of the roster of the first three games before ushering in the new roster and the new narrative of Tekken 4 and beyond, the later games. And it's a sort of metaphorical hyphen, I think, separating the old from the new, the original trilogy and the next generation of games. So yeah, next time I'll go on to talk about Tekken 4 in the next installment of the History of Tekken series, and this is where I feel, I think Tekken 4 is just kind of, in my opinion, it shows that you can't really win them all, and it takes a kind of severe downturn. And Tekken Tag really works as this sort of marker of these three sort of infallible games, punctuated by Tekken Tag. We see things start to unravel after this.